from NBC News. The State of the Union Address. Live from Washington, here is Brian Williams.
And good evening from Capitol Hill. The Constitution calls on the President to give the Congress information on the State of the Union from time to time. Somehow, over time, it has become a live, primetime, televised national event, a platform for the President, followed by a chance for the opposition party to respond. And so, a joint session of Congress awaits the newly re-elected President. Fresh from a largely successful election in Iraq, the audience before him in the chamber is deeply divided politically, but then again, so are the American people these days. In the audience tonight, the diplomatic corps, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, one of the 9 Supreme Court justices, and of course, the First Lady and special guests of the President. You see Mrs. Bush entering now. And for purposes of continuity of government in the event of a national disaster, this year, as with other years, one member of the cabinet will sit out this event. Shortly, the President will be introduced by the Sergeant at Arms. And with me for all of it this evening, NBC News Washington Bureau Chief, moderator of Meet the Press, Tim Russert. And here we go at it again. Today, Tim, I mentioned this on Nightly News this evening, part of the State of the Union Day tradition. You and I were guests of the President for lunch today and then spent some time with the Democrats, the opposition party on the Hill. I'll leave it to you to sum up how you found the President in mood and demeanor, and is he ready for the game?
Significantly different than Inauguration Day. Inauguration Day was viewed as the President's Day. As the Democratic leadership said to us today, Brian, this is the country's day, and we are going to respond to George Bush's agenda and vision with our own. The President was feisty. He's going to lay down the marker on Social Security, lay down the marker on Iraq, lay down the marker on social and cultural issues. And the Democrats are also going to say, hold on, Mr. President, we're not going along with you unless we see all your cards and all the specifics. We have really engaged in a big way, a big debate on Social Security and I think Iraq.
We're, as we talk, we'll watch some of the pictures from the House chamber. We just saw the Supreme Court announced, and you saw only one justice, Stephen Breyer, a former Senate staffer. He alone attended last time, and he alone is attending this year, as you see the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, followed by outgoing Attorney General John Ashcroft. And looking at the Attorney General, Tim, we have a divisive fight for his successor, the White House counsel, Judge Gonzalez. You mentioned the Democrats on the other side of the aisle from the President. What about those Republican votes, though? How dependable are they for the President?
Not wholly. The Democrats believe they have all 45 in their party against private accounts, personal accounts, whatever word you want to use, and there is a semantics debate here in Washington.
That's right.
But there are a handful of Republicans, Brian, who've expressed deep reservations about private accounts. In fact, Chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Bill Thomas, Republican, says those accounts alone do not deal with or solve the Social Security problem. The President has an uphill fight. He has to convince the American people that Social Security is in trouble and that, two, his solution will fix it.
Jim Nicholson, the new Secretary of Veterans Affairs, a veteran himself. A lot of very new faces in this cabinet. A lot of many of them known to official Washington, but people will become familiar with these cabinet secretaries over time. Here we are at 9:04 Eastern Time. The Bush White House, known for its punctuality, traditionally hasn't been able to control this event quite as closely. They're running a bit behind where they would like to be. At the White House for us tonight, NBC News correspondent David Gregory. David, we may have just a few seconds here as the President, we're told, is on the move from the holding room. The mood there at the White House today.
Well, they know there's a lot at stake here, Brian, and Tim touched on it. This is really the early test of the President's political capital he talked so much about after the election. Can he provide enough political cover to Republicans who are not just worried about his reelection but their own to take on Social Security? And can he overcome the objections of Democrats? Harry Reid, the minority leader, has said very clearly with the idea of private accounts that they will not happen. The Democrats are united in opposition, Brian.
And we're awaiting the announcement of Bill Livingood, who will come in and announce that the president has arrived. They'll hold the president just behind those double doors.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
Congress arrive in those seats, Brian, 3 and 4 hours early just for this magical moment. Will my constituents see me back at home shaking hands with the President of the United States? I am powerful.
As much jostling as a hockey game to get down there on the aisle. Congressman Eliot Engel, a Democrat from New York, is famous for his seat on the aisle. He always manages to get down and shake the hand of whatever president is in power, regardless of party. You see Nancy Pelosi, the Democratic leader in the House, just off the president's shoulder. Dr. Bill Frist, the majority leader in the Senate, of course, off the president's other shoulder. And I hope one of our many cameras can record the predicted, there it is, the Eliot Engel moment. The Democrat from the Bronx with a good sense of timing and positioning.
There's Tom DeLay, the Republican leader, behind Nancy Pelosi. Big changes on the House Ethics Committee today. Several people close to Tom DeLay have been appointed, which will create another furor with the Democrats.
Justice Breyer, and of course General Myers, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, familiar to so many Americans after so many Pentagon briefings. The chiefs of all the branches of the service traditionally sit in the front row. Chip Reid, who covers Congress for us, is in Statuary Hall. Chip, we'll hear a lot of applause breaks tonight, but then the hard work begins with the first light of day tomorrow morning. And what kind of Congress will this be?
Well, I tell you, Brian, it's going to be a very divided Congress, as you have been discussing. The Democrats are going to rip into the president's Social Security proposal. We've already seen the text of Harry Reid's response tonight. Harry Reid, the Democratic leader of the Senate, he's going to call the president's Social Security proposal Social Security roulette. And he says, hey, I'm from Las Vegas. I know roulette when I see it. And tomorrow, the Democrats are going to hold a press conference at the FDR Memorial here in town to emphasize the fact that for 70 years since FDR, Social Security has been stable. They don't want it touched. Brian?
Chip Reid, thanks. Democrats have always contended for decades that because it's in the DNA of their party, because it was the brainchild of FDR, the Republicans have been after Social Security as a behemoth entitlement program, one that they never liked. And Tim, this one of many standing ovations is, regardless of president or party, one of the great traditions in Washington, as Speaker Hastert gavels the body to order.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and the distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States.
Both parties get on their feet, but it'll be a different scene tomorrow, Brian, when the president travels around the country to the so-called red states, Republican states that have Democratic senators. And we were told today the president will be greeted by radio ads, television ads, and even demonstrators saying, Mr. President, we disagree with you on Social Security. We talked earlier tonight about the third rail, that'll rail on a subway line or a train line where you can get electrocuted if you touch it.
Vice President Cheney, members of Congress, fellow citizens. As the new Congress gathers, all of us in the elected branches of government share a great privilege. We've been placed in office by the votes of the people we serve. And tonight, that is a privilege we share with newly elected leaders of Afghanistan, the Palestinian territories, Ukraine, and a free and sovereign Iraq. 2 weeks ago, I stood on the steps of this Capitol and renewed the commitment of our nation to the guiding ideal of liberty for all. This evening, I will set forth policies to advance that ideal at home and around the world. Tonight, with a healthy, growing economy, with more Americans going back to work, with our nation an active force for good in the world, the state of our union is confident and strong. Our generation has been blessed by the expansion of opportunity, by advances in medicine, by the security purchased by our parents' sacrifice. Now, as we see a little gray in the mirror, or a lot of gray, and we watch our children moving into adulthood, we ask the question, what will be the state of their union? Members of Congress, the choices we make together will answer that question. Over the next several months, on issue after issue, let us do what Americans have always done and build a better world for our children and our grandchildren. First, we must be good stewards of this economy and renew the great institutions on which millions of our fellow citizens rely. America's economy is the fastest growing of any major industrialized nation. In the past 4 years, we provided tax relief to every person who pays income taxes, overcome a recession, opened up new markets abroad, prosecuted corporate criminals, raised home ownership to its highest level in history, and in the last year alone, the United States has added 2.3 million new jobs. When action was needed, the Congress delivered, and the nation is grateful. Now we must add to these achievements by making our economy more flexible, more innovative, and more competitive. We will keep America the economic leader of the world. America's prosperity requires restraining the spending appetite of the federal government. I welcome the bipartisan enthusiasm for spending discipline. I will send you a budget that holds the growth of discretionary spending below inflation, makes tax relief permanent, and stays on track to cut the deficit in half by 2009. My budget substantially reduces or eliminates more than 150 government programs that are not getting results, or duplicate current efforts, or do not fulfill essential priorities. The principle here is clear. Taxpayer dollars must be spent wisely or not at all. To make our economy stronger and more dynamic, we must prepare a rising generation to fill the jobs of the 21st century. Under the No Child Left Behind Act, standards are higher, test scores are on the rise, and we're closing the achievement gap for minority students. Now we must demand better results from our high schools, so every high school diploma is a ticket to success. We will help an additional 200,000 workers to get training for a better career by reforming our job training system and strengthening America's community colleges. And we will make it easier for Americans to afford a college education by increasing the size of Pell Grants. To make our economy stronger and more competitive, America must reward, not punish, the efforts and dreams of entrepreneurs. Small business is the path of advancement, especially for women and minorities. So we must free small businesses from needless regulation and protect honest job creators from junk lawsuits. Justice is distorted, and our economy is held back by irresponsible class actions and frivolous asbestos claims. And I urge Congress to pass legal reforms this year. To make our economy stronger and more productive, we must make health care more affordable and give families greater access to good coverage and more control over their health decisions. I ask Congress to move forward on a comprehensive health care agenda with tax credits to help low-income workers buy insurance, a community health center in every poor county, improved information technology to prevent medical error and needless costs, association health plans for small businesses and their employees, expanded health savings accounts, and medical liability reform that will reduce health care costs and make sure patients have the doctors and care they need. To keep our economy growing, we also need reliable supplies of affordable, environmentally responsible energy. Nearly 4 years ago, I submitted a comprehensive energy strategy that encourages conservation, alternative sources, a modernized electricity grid, and more production here at home, including safe, clean nuclear energy. My Clear Skies legislation will cut power plant pollution and improve the health of our citizens. And my budget provides strong funding for leading-edge technology, from hydrogen-fueled cars to clean coal to renewable sources such as ethanol. Four years of debate is enough. I urge Congress to pass legislation that makes America more secure and less dependent on foreign energy. All these proposals are essential to expand this economy and add new jobs, but they're just the beginning of our duty. To build the prosperity of future generations, we must update institutions that were created to meet the needs of an earlier time. Year after year, Americans are burdened by an archaic, incoherent federal tax code. I've appointed a bipartisan panel to examine the tax code from top to bottom. And when the recommendations are delivered, you and I will work together to give this nation a tax code that is pro-growth, easy to understand, and fair to all. America's immigration system is also outdated, unsuited to the needs of our economy and to the values of our country. We should not be content with laws that punish hardworking people who want only to provide for their families and deny businesses willing workers and invite chaos at our border. It is time for an immigration policy that permits temporary guest workers to fill jobs Americans will not take, that rejects amnesty, that tells us who is entering and leaving our country, and that closes the border to drug dealers and terrorists. One of America's most important institutions, a symbol of the trust between generations, is also in need of wise and effective reform. Social Security was a great moral success of the 20th century, and we must honor its great purposes in this new century. The system, however, on its current path is headed toward bankruptcy, and so we must join together to strengthen and save Social Security. Today, more than 45 million Americans receive Social Security benefits, and millions more are nearing retirement. And for them, the system is sound and fiscally strong. I have a message for every American who is 55 or older. Do not let anyone mislead you. For you, the Social Security system will not change in any way. For younger workers, the Social Security system has serious problems that will grow worse with time. Social Security was created decades ago for a very different era. In those days, people did not live as long. Benefits were much lower than they are today. And a half-century ago, about 16 workers paid into the system for each person drawing benefits. Our society has changed in ways the founders of Social Security could not have foreseen. In today's world, people are living longer and therefore drawing benefits longer. And those benefits are scheduled to rise dramatically over the next few decades. And instead of 16 workers paying in for every beneficiary, right now it's only about 3 workers. And over the next few decades, that number will fall to just 2 workers per beneficiary. With each passing year, fewer workers are paying ever higher benefits to an ever larger number of retirees. So here's the result. 13 years from now, in 2018, Social Security will be paying out more than it takes in. And every year afterward will bring a new shortfall, bigger than the year before. For example, in the year 2027, the government will somehow have to come up with an extra $200 billion to keep the system afloat. And by 2033, the annual shortfall would be more than $300 billion. By the year 2042, the entire system would be exhausted and bankrupt. If steps are not taken to avert that outcome, the only solutions would be dramatically higher taxes, massive new borrowing, or sudden and severe cuts in Social Security benefits or other government programs. I recognize that 2018 and 2042 may seem a long way off, but those days aren't so distant, as any parent will tell you. If you have a 5-year-old, you're already concerned about how you'll pay for college tuition 13 years down the road. If you've got children in their 20s, as some of us do, the idea of Social Security collapsing before they retire does not seem like a small matter. And it should not be a small matter to the United States Congress. you and I share a responsibility. We must pass reforms that solve the financial problems of Social Security once and for all. Fixing Social Security permanently will require an open, candid review of the options. Some have suggested limiting benefits for wealthy retirees. Former Congressman Tim Penny has raised the possibility of indexing benefits to prices rather than wages. During the 1990s, my predecessor, President Clinton, spoke of increasing the retirement age. Former Senator John Breaux suggested discouraging early collection of Social Security benefits. The late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan recommended changing the way benefits are calculated. All these ideas are on the table. I know that none of these reforms would be easy, but we have to move ahead with courage and honesty, because our children's retirement security is more important than partisan politics. I will work with members of Congress to find the most effective combination of reforms. I will listen to anyone who has a good idea to offer. We must, however, be guided by some basic principles. We must make Social Security permanently sound, not leave that task for another day. We must not jeopardize our economic strength by increasing payroll taxes. We must ensure that lower-income Americans get the help they need to have dignity and peace of mind in their retirement. We must guarantee there is no change for those now retired or nearing retirement. And we must take care that any changes in the system are gradual, so younger workers have years to prepare and plan for their future. As we fix Social Security, we also have the responsibility to make the system a better deal for younger workers. And the best way to reach that goal is through voluntary personal retirement accounts. Here's how the idea works. Right now, a set portion of the money you earn is taken out of your paycheck to pay for the Social Security benefits of today's retirees. If you're a younger worker, I believe you should be able to set aside part of that money in your own retirement account so you can build a nest egg for your own future. Here's why the personal accounts are a better deal. Your money will grow over time at a greater rate than anything the current system can deliver. And your account will provide money for retirement over and above the check you will receive from Social Security. In addition, you will be able to pass along the money that accumulates in your personal account, if you wish, to your children and grandchildren. And best of all, the money in the account is yours, and the government can never take it away. The goal here is greater security in retirement, so we will set careful guidelines for personal accounts. We'll make sure the money can only go into a conservative mix of bonds and stock funds. We'll make sure that your earnings are not eaten up by hidden Wall Street fees. We'll make sure there are good options to protect your investments from sudden market swings on the eve of your retirement. We'll make sure a personal account cannot be emptied out all at once, but rather paid out over time as an addition to traditional Social Security benefits. And we will make sure this plan is fiscally responsible by starting personal accounts gradually and raising the yearly limits on contributions over time, eventually permitting all workers to set aside 4 percentage points of their payroll taxes in their accounts. Personal retirement accounts should be familiar to federal employees, because you already have something similar called the Thrift Savings Plan, which lets workers deposit a portion of their paychecks into any of 5 different broadly based investment funds. It's time to extend the same security and choice and ownership to young Americans. Our second great responsibility to our children and grandchildren is to honor and to pass along the values that sustain a free society. So many of my generation, after a long journey, have come home to family and faith and are determined to bring up responsible, moral children. Government is not the source of these values, but government should never undermine them. Because marriage is a sacred institution and the foundation of society, it should not be redefined by activist judges. For the good of families, children, and society, I support a constitutional amendment to protect the institution of marriage. Because a society is measured by how it treats the weak and vulnerable, we must strive to build a culture of life. Medical research can help us reach that goal by developing treatments and cures that save lives and help people overcome disabilities. And I thank the Congress for doubling the funding of the National Institutes of Health. To build a culture of life, we must also ensure that scientific advances always serve human dignity, not take advantage of some lives for the benefit of others. We should all be able to agree. We should all be able to agree on some clear standards. I will work with Congress to ensure that human embryos are not created for experimentation or grown for body parts, and that human life is never bought or sold as a commodity. America will continue to lead the world in medical research that is ambitious, aggressive, and always ethical. Because courts must always deliver impartial justice, judges have a duty to faithfully interpret the law, not legislate from the bench. As President, I have a constitutional responsibility to nominate men and women who understand the role of courts in our democracy and are well qualified to serve on the bench, and I have done so. The Constitution also gives the Senate a responsibility. Every judicial nominee deserves an up or down vote. Because one of the deepest values of our country is compassion, we must never turn away from any citizen who feels isolated from the opportunities of America. Our government will continue to support faith-based and community groups that bring hope to harsh places. Now we need to focus on giving young people, especially young men in our cities, better options than apathy or gangs or jail. Tonight I propose a 3-year initiative to help organizations keep young people out of gangs and show young men an ideal of manhood that respects women and rejects violence. Taking on gang life will be one part of a broader outreach to at-risk youth, which involves parents and pastors, coaches and community leaders in programs ranging from literacy to sports. And I'm proud that the leader of this nationwide effort will be our First Lady, Laura Bush. Because HIV/AIDS brings suffering and fear into so many lives, I ask you to reauthorize the Ryan White Act to encourage prevention and provide care and treatment to the victims of that disease. And as we update this important law, we must focus our efforts on fellow citizens with the highest rates of new cases, African American men and women. Because one of the main sources of our national unity is our belief in equal justice, we need to make sure Americans of all races and backgrounds have confidence in the system that provides justice. In America, we must make doubly sure no person is held to account for a crime he or she did not commit. So we are dramatically expanding the use of DNA evidence to prevent wrongful conviction. Soon I will send to Congress a proposal to fund special training for defense counsel in capital cases, because people on trial for their lives must have competent lawyers by their side. Our third responsibility to future generations is to leave them in America that is safe from danger and protected by peace. We will pass along to our children all the freedoms we enjoy, and chief among them is freedom from fear. In the 3.5 years since September the 11th, 2001, we've taken unprecedented actions to protect Americans. We've created a new Department of Government to defend our homeland, focused the FBI on preventing terrorism, begun to reform our intelligence agencies, broken up terror cells across the country, expanded research on defenses against biological and chemical attack, improved border security, and trained more than 500,000 first responders. Police and firefighters, air marshals, researchers, and so many others are working every day to make our homeland safer, and we thank them all. Our nation, working with allies and friends, has also confronted the enemy abroad with measures that are determined, successful, and continuing. The al-Qaeda terror network that attacked our country still has leaders, but many of its top commanders have been removed. There are still governments that sponsor and harbor terrorists, but their number has declined. There are still regimes seeking weapons of mass destruction, but no longer without attention and without consequence. Our country is still the target of terrorists who want to kill many and intimidate us all, and we will stay on the offensive against them until the fight is won. pursuing our enemies is a vital commitment of the war on terror, and I thank the Congress for providing our service men and women with the resources they have needed. During this time of war, we must continue to support our military and give them the tools for victory. Other nations around the globe have stood with us. In Afghanistan, an international force is helping provide security. In Iraq, 28 countries have troops on the ground. The United Nations and the European Union provided technical assistance for the elections. And NATO is leading a mission to help train Iraqi officers. We're cooperating with 60 governments in the Proliferation Security Initiative to detect and stop the transit of dangerous materials. We're working closely with the governments in Asia to convince North Korea to abandon its nuclear ambitions. Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and 9 other countries have captured or detained al-Qaeda terrorists. In the next 4 years, my administration will continue to build the coalitions that will defeat the dangers of our time. In the long term, the peace we seek will only be achieved by eliminating the conditions that feed radicalism and ideologies of murder. If whole regions of the world remain in despair and grow in hatred, they will be the recruiting grounds for terror. And that terror will stalk America and other free nations for decades. The only force powerful enough to stop the rise of tyranny and terror and replace hatred with hope is the force of human freedom. Our enemies know this, and that is why the terrorist Zarqawi recently declared war on what he called the evil principle of democracy. And we've declared our own intention. America will stand with the allies of freedom to support democratic movements in the Middle East and beyond, with the ultimate goal of ending tyranny in our world. The United States has no right, no desire, and no intention to impose our form of government on anyone else. That is one of the main differences between us and our enemies. They seek to impose and expand an empire of oppression in which a tiny group of brutal, self-appointed rulers control every aspect of every life. Our aim is to build and preserve a community of free and independent nations with governments that answer to their citizens and reflect their own cultures. And because democracies respect their own people and their neighbors, the advance of freedom will lead to peace. That advance has great momentum in our time, shown by women voting in Afghanistan and Palestinians choosing a new direction, and the people of Ukraine asserting their democratic rights and electing a president. We are witnessing landmark events in the history of liberty, and in the coming years, we will add to that story. The beginnings of reform and democracy in the Palestinian territories are now showing the power of freedom to break old patterns of violence and failure. Tomorrow morning, Secretary of State Rice departs on a trip that will take her to Israel and the West Bank for meetings with Prime Minister Sharon and President Abbas. She will discuss with them how we and our friends can help the Palestinian people end terror and build the institutions of a peaceful, independent, democratic state. To promote this democracy, I will ask Congress for $350 million to support Palestinian political, economic, and security reforms. The goal of two democratic states, Israel and Palestine living side by side in peace, is within reach, and America will help them achieve that goal. To promote peace and stability in the broader Middle East, the United States will work with our friends in the region to fight the common threat of terror while we encourage a higher standard of freedom. Hopeful reform is already taking hold in an arc from Morocco to Jordan to Bahrain. The government of Saudi Arabia can demonstrate its leadership in the region by expanding the role of its people in determining their future. And the great and proud nation of Egypt, which showed the way toward peace in the Middle East, can now show the way toward democracy in the Middle East. To promote peace in the broader Middle East, we must confront regimes that continue to harbor terrorists and pursue weapons of mass murder. Syria still allows its territory and parts of Lebanon to be used by terrorists who seek to destroy every chance of peace in the region. You have passed, and we are applying the Syrian Accountability Act, and we expect the Syrian government to end all support for terror and open the door to freedom. Today, Iran remains the world's primary state sponsor of terror, pursuing nuclear weapons while depriving its people of the freedom they seek and deserve. We are working with European allies to make clear to the Iranian regime that it must give up its uranium enrichment program and any plutonium reprocessing and end its support for terror. And to the Iranian people, I say tonight, as you stand for your own liberty, America stands with you. Our generational commitment to the advance of freedom, especially in the Middle East, is now being tested and honored in Iraq. That country is a vital front in the war on terror, which is why the terrorists have chosen to make a stand there. Our men and women in uniform are fighting terrorists in Iraq, so we do not have to face them here at home. The victory of freedom in Iraq will strengthen a new ally in the war on terror, inspire democratic reformers from Damascus to Tehran, bring more hope and progress to a troubled region, and thereby lift a terrible threat from the lives of our children and grandchildren. We will succeed because the Iraqi people value their own liberty, as they showed the world last Sunday. Across Iraq, often at great risk, millions of citizens went to the polls and elected 275 men and women to represent them in a new transitional National Assembly. A young woman in Baghdad told of waking to the sound of mortar fire on Election Day and wondering if it might be too dangerous to vote. She said, hearing those explosions, it occurred to me, the insurgents are weak. They are afraid of democracy. They are losing. So I got my husband and I got my parents, and we all came out and voted together. Americans recognize that spirit of liberty because we share it. In any nation, casting your vote is an act of civic responsibility. For millions of Iraqis, it was also an act of personal courage, and they have earned the respect of us all. One of Iraq's leading democracy and human rights advocates is Safia Taleb al-Suhail. She says of her country, "We were occupied for 35 years by Saddam Hussein. That was the real occupation. Thank you to the American people who paid the cost, but most of all, to the soldiers." 11 years ago, Safia's father was assassinated by Saddam's intelligence service. 3 days ago in Baghdad, Safia was finally able to vote for the leaders of her country, and we are honored that she is with us tonight. The terrorists and insurgents are violently opposed to democracy and will continue to attack it. Yet the terrorists' most powerful myth is being destroyed. The whole world is seeing that the car bombers and assassins are not only fighting coalition forces, they are trying to destroy the hopes of Iraqis expressed in free elections. And the whole world now knows that a small group of extremists will not overturn the will of the Iraqi people. We will succeed in Iraq because Iraqis are determined to fight for their own freedom and to write their own history. As Prime Minister Alawi said in his speech to Congress last September, ordinary Iraqis are anxious to shoulder all the security burdens of our country as quickly as possible. That is the natural desire of an independent nation, and it is also the stated mission of our coalition in Iraq. The new political situation in Iraq opens a new phase of our work in that country. At the recommendation of our commanders on the ground, and in consultation with the Iraqi government, we will increasingly focus our efforts on helping prepare more capable Iraqi security forces, forces with skilled officers, and an effective command structure. As those forces become more self-reliant and take on greater security responsibilities, America and its coalition partners will increasingly be in a supporting role. In the end, Iraqis must be able to defend their own country and we will help that proud new nation secure its liberty. Recently, an Iraqi interpreter said to a reporter, "Tell America not to abandon us." He and all Iraqis can be certain, while our military strategy is adapting to circumstances, our commitment remains firm and unchanging. We are standing for the freedom of our Iraqi friends, and freedom in Iraq will make America safer for generations to come. We will not set an artificial timetable for leaving Iraq, because that would embolden the terrorists and make them believe they can wait us out. We are in Iraq to achieve a result, a country that is democratic, representative of all its people, at peace with its neighbors, and able to defend itself. And when that result is achieved, our men and women serving in Iraq will return home with the honor they have earned. Right now, Americans in uniform are serving at posts across the world, often taking great risks on my orders. We have given them training and equipment, and they have given us an example of idealism and character that makes every American proud. The volunteers of our military are unrelenting in battle, unwavering in loyalty, unmatched in honor and decency, and every day they're making our nation more secure. Some of our servicemen and women have survived terrible injuries, and this grateful nation will do everything we can to help them recover. And we have said farewell to some very good men and women who died for our freedom and whose memory this nation will honor forever. One name we honor is Marine Corps Sergeant Byron Norwood of Pflugerville, Texas, who was killed during the assault on Fallujah. His mom, Janet, sent me a letter and told me how much Byron loved being a Marine and how proud he was to be on the front line against terror. She wrote, "When Byron was home the last time, I said that I wanted to protect him like I had since he was born. He just hugged me and said, 'You've done your job, Mom. Now it is my turn to protect you.'" Ladies and gentlemen, with grateful hearts, we honor freedom's defenders and our military families, represented here this evening by Sergeant Norwood's mom and dad, Janet and Bill Norwood. in these 4 years, Americans have seen the unfolding of large events. We have known times of sorrow and hours of uncertainty and days of victory. In all this history, even when we have disagreed, we have seen threads of purpose that unite us. The attack on freedom in our world has reaffirmed our confidence in freedom's power to change the world. We're all part of a great venture to extend the promise of freedom in our country, to renew the values that sustain our liberty, and to spread the peace that freedom brings. As Franklin Roosevelt once reminded Americans, each age is a dream that is dying or one that is coming to birth. And we live in the country where the biggest dreams are born. The abolition of slavery was only a dream until it was fulfilled. The liberation of Europe from fascism was only a dream until it was achieved. The fall of imperial communism was only a dream until one day it was accomplished. Our generation has dreams of its own, and we also go forward with confidence. The road of Providence is uneven and unpredictable, yet we know where it leads. It leads to freedom. Thank you, and may God bless America.
The State of the Union as delivered by President George W. Bush. A 54-minute political tour of the nation and the world, interrupted by applause 66 times. The first ever State of the Union to feature purple-tipped index fingers on the, as you saw, the index fingers of some freshman members of the House of Representatives who did this as a statement, tried to get, some Republicans tried to get Democrats to go along, and of course on the Iraqi woman seated next to the First Lady, a survivor of the regime of Saddam Hussein in Iraq. An emotional moment, the parents of a Marine. Tim Russert, what will stand out? Will it be Social Security, where the president tonight didn't just touch on the third rail of American politics, he reached out and grabbed hold of it?
And he did so by putting on the table ideas that has been suggested for years. He used Democratic names as authors of those ideas: Bill Clinton, Pat Moynihan, John Breaux, Tim Penny. He'll campaign around the country for his idea of Social Security reform. Brian, NBC News has obtained Saving Social Security, a playbook that the Republicans have actually put out to their members with sample speeches, how to sell the president's program. But I think the speech tonight will be remembered more for the passion and emotion of the words about Iraq. This president has bet his presidency on the outcome in Iraq. He is staying the course. Much of it is out of his control, but he's emboldened by the election results on Sunday. And I think it will be a cloud that hovers over the Bush presidency, could very well affect his prospects for Social Security. As goes Iraq, will go the Bush second term.
The president became quite emotional there. Everyone in the chamber did, and a good many of people watching when they saw the parents rise to standing ovation. The mother holding her son's dog tags in her hand, and he remained emotional walking up the aisle. Process that usually takes a few minutes. NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent Andrea Mitchell has been watching and listening with us. She is due to depart on Secretary Rice's trip tomorrow. And Andrea, how does this extend the president's Inauguration Day remarks?
Well, it walks it back a bit. It's more nuanced and certainly more appealing to Europeans and to Arab leaders, because he speaks of it as a generational commitment to democracy, Brian, and that means he has explicitly said that the United States does not want to impose our system on other governments. So he's making it very, very specific, as they have in the days since the State of the Union, that they were not launching some kind of a new manifest destiny. This democracy agenda that Condi Rice is going to be bringing to Europe and to the Middle East is also going to bring some money, as you heard the president say, $350 million for the Palestinians. That is also very welcome to Europe. Europe and the U.S. have disagreements over Iran and China and sanctions, but they are very much welcoming the fact that the U.S. is going to make this big commitment to Palestinian-Israeli peace, long neglected, according to European critics, Brian.
President still making his way up the central aisle. We will, in a matter of minutes, of course, be hearing the Democratic response. The leaders of the House and Senate are being taken now to the room inside the Capitol that will act as the studio for the Democratic response, which we can tell you will be significantly shorter and probably more personal on their part than the President's State of the Union address, which by definition has to hit so many different marks and so many different bases. We heard much discussion of the role of the U.S. military in the world, what with so many troops committed tonight as we speak on the ground in different nations. President absolutely has indicated he sees this as a wartime address. NBC News Pentagon correspondent Jim McClashevsky standing by there. And Jim, it seems to me two issues at the Pentagon. Number one, battling the perception that because there was a successful election in Iraq, that somehow means that the troops will be coming home tomorrow. And second, the fact that the president very shortly is going to be limited to the number of troops he can draw from. The Guard and Reserves are almost tapped out.
Well, that's exactly right. This war in Iraq has put a tremendous stress not only on the regular Army, but the National Guard and Reserve. We heard that in some testimony on Capitol Hill today. And initially here in the Pentagon, there was immediately after the elections, there was a sense of accomplishment, even vindication, but it didn't last very long as the harsh realities of Iraq quickly sunk back in. Senior military officials saying that even after these elections, not only will violence continue, but it's expected to get worse in the short term as the insurgents now test and try to intimidate this new transitional government. And there's still no good, precise answer to the question, when will American troops come home? Small numbers of troops could start coming home, probably sometime this summer, but significant numbers of American troops will not be pulled out of Iraq until, as the president indicated tonight, the Iraqis themselves are fully equipped, fully trained to protect themselves, and military officials predict that will take years. So after an initial burst of optimism here at the Pentagon after the elections, a somber, serious realization set back in that there's still a lot to do in Iraq, and unfortunately, in that process, many more Iraqi civilians and American troops will die. Brian.
Our man at the Pentagon, Jim McClashevsky, thanks. And before we go to a break and then followed by the Democratic response, Tim, real quickly, a question about tone. We heard the Democrats shouting down a specific proposal, really for the first time in modern memory, I think.
Like question time over in Great Britain when I heard them say no, no, as to whether or not Social Security will go bankrupt. The Democrats have lost two hotly contested presidential elections, and their nerves are frayed. You can feel it in this town, Brian, and I think it was reflected on the floor tonight. I think the debate about Social Security is going to be hot, heated, and contentious.
Well, we'll hear it come up again as the Democrats respond. On the other side of this break, our live coverage of the State of the Union address and the Democratic response continues right after this.
What is Priya?
It's my 3 o'clock appointment.
It's my chocolate fix.
It's my multivitamin.
Priya is the snack for every part of you. With as much calcium as a glass of milk, soy protein for your muscles, antioxidants for a healthy glow, and chocolate to keep you very happy. 110-calorie Priya and Priya Carb Select from Power Bar. Be great.
So what will Priya be to you?
Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen. Ever since Alex was about this high, I have dreamt of this day. I just wanted to make sure that the day that we sent our little girl off to start her own family was every bit as memorable as the day she first joined ours. But I'm just their financial advisor. Now, how about a few words from her dad?
When you work with a Morgan Stanley financial advisor, you get someone unusually devoted to your dreams, one client at a time.
Hey, son, I saw this great deal from Singular. Buy one video phone, get one free, and I thought, cool way to keep in touch. I know being away for the first time could be kind of tough.
Ryan.
College doesn't have to be all about the books.
Thanks, Ryan.
Try to have some fun. Eventually, you'll make new friends.
Only Singular gives you a great deal on its latest video phone. Buy this awesome phone for just $49.99. Get another one free.
Your grandmother says hello. The Johnsons, they say
the new Singular, raising the bar.
Brian Williams talks with Laura Bush. NBC 19 News tomorrow.
There are lots of places that you can shop for a new car, but only one place you need to look: Indiatos.com. At Indiatos.com, you can shop by price, shop by payment, shop by zip code. You can even shop by dealer. Who says you gotta drive all over town to shop for a new car? Park yourself here. Indiatos.com. It's like finding a car lot the size of central Indiana.
Light snow in the overnight forecast. Get the story on the night feed.
We are back. In a moment, we'll check in on the situation tonight in Baghdad. We'll talk to Senator John McCain and others. But first, we're going to go inside the Capitol building for the Democratic response. Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi of California will talk about foreign issues. And the new leader of the Democratic side of the Senate, Senator Harry Reid of Nevada, will tackle domestic issues. Here they are.
I'm Harry Reid from Nevada, the new Democratic leader of the United States Senate.
I'm Nancy Pelosi of California, the Democratic leader of the House of Representatives.
Now that you've heard from the President, I appreciate your taking a few minutes with us as we give our views on how we can live up to the American promise. I was born and raised in the high desert of Nevada in a tiny town called Searchlight. My dad was a hard rock miner. My mom took in wash. I grew up around people of strong values, even if they rarely talked about them. They loved their country, worshiped God, never shunned hard work, and never asked for special favors. My life has been very different from what I imagined growing up, but no matter how far I've traveled, Searchlight is still the place I go back to, and still the place I call home. A few weeks ago, I joined some friends of mine for a bite to eat at the Nugget, Searchlight's only restaurant. We were sitting down in a booth when a young boy about 10 years old named Devin walked up to us. Carrying a skateboard under his arm, he said, "Senator Reid, when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Well, the truth is Devin could probably do a lot better. But the point still holds, and it's this. No one ever had to tell young Devin to dream big dreams. No one ever had to teach him that America is a place of possibility. He knows those things because they're born deep in all Americans. In the coming year, I believe we can make sure America lives up to its legacy as a land of opportunity if the President is willing to join hands and build from the center. It's important that we succeed. It's time that America's government lived up to the same values as America's families. It's time we invested in America's future and made sure our people have the skills to compete and thrive in a 21st century economy. That's what Democrats believe, and that's where we stand, and that's what we'll fight for. Too many of the President's economic policies have left Americans and American companies struggling. And after we worked so hard to eliminate the deficit, his policies have added trillions to the debt. In effect, a birth tax of $36,000 on every child that is born. We Democrats have a different vision, spurring research and development in new technologies to help create the jobs of the future, rolling up our sleeves and fighting for today's jobs by ending the special tax breaks that encourage big corporations to ship jobs overseas, a trade policy that enforces the rules of the road so that we play to win in the global marketplace instead of sitting by and getting played for fools. After World War II, through the Marshall Plan, we rebuilt Europe, and they went from poverty to an economic powerhouse. Today, we need to invest in our own nation's future with a Marshall Plan for America to build the infrastructure our economy needs to go and to grow. President Eisenhower did that in the 1950s with interstate highways. National investment created the internet in the 1970s. We need to build the next economy, and we need to start now. The 21st century economy holds great promise for our people, but unless we give all Americans the skills they need to succeed, countries like India and China will be taking our good-paying jobs that should be ours. From early childhood education to better elementary and high schools, to making college more affordable, to training workers so they can get better jobs, Democrats believe every American should have a world-class education and the skills they need in a worldwide economy. Healthcare costs have shot up double digits, year after year of the Bush administration, and that's costing us jobs, costing us our competitiveness, and costing families their peace of mind. We need to make health care and prescription drugs affordable so that our families and our small businesses will no longer have to shoulder this dead weight. Good new jobs, world-class education, affordable health care, these things matter. Unfortunately, much of what the president offered weren't real answers. You know, today is Groundhog Day. And what we saw and heard tonight was a little like the movie Groundhog Day. The same old ideology that we've heard before, over and over and over again. We can do better. I want you to know that when we believe the president is on the right track, we won't let partisan interests get in the way of what's good for our country. We will be the first in line to work with him. But when he gets off track, we will be there to hold him accountable. That's why we so strongly disagree with the president's plan to privatize Social Security. Let me share with you why I believe the president's plan is so dangerous. There's a lot we can do to improve America's retirement security, but it's wrong to replace the guaranteed benefit that Americans have earned with a guaranteed benefit cut of up to 40%. Make no mistake, that's exactly what President Bush is proposing. The Bush plan would take our already record high $4.3 trillion debt and put us another $2 trillion in the red. That's an immoral burden to place on the backs of the next generation. But maybe most of all, the Bush plan isn't really Social Security reform. It's more like Social Security roulette. Democrats are all for giving Americans more of a say and more choices when it comes to their retirement savings, but that doesn't mean taking Social Security's guarantee and gambling with it. And that's coming from a senator who represents Las Vegas. Sometimes important questions like Social Security or the economy or education get reduced to dollars and cents with the competing policies of political parties. But really, these are questions about our old-fashioned moral values that don't get talked about much in Washington, but matter so much to our country. Are we willing to do right by our parents and take care of our children? Do we believe that big corporations with powerful lobbyists should get special favors and that the wealthiest should get special tax breaks? Or do we believe we are all God's children and that each of us should get a fair shot and a say in our future? Will we be able to tell young people, like Devin back in Searchlight, that America is still the land of the open road and that you can travel that open road to the place of your choice? Even after the president's speech, the American people are still asking these questions. You can be sure that Democrats will continue to offer real answers in the months ahead. Now, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, the great leader of the House Democrats, Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you, Senator Reid. Throughout our nation's history, hope and optimism have defined the American spirit. With pride and determination, every generation has passed on a stronger America than the one it inherited. Our greatest responsibility is to leave our children a world that is a safer and more secure place. As House Democratic leader, I want to speak with you this evening about an issue of grave concern, the national security of our country. Any discussion of our national security must begin with recognition and respect for our men and women in uniform. Whether they are fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan or delivering humanitarian aid to the victims of the tsunami in Asia, our troops have the gratitude of every American for their courage, their patriotism, and the sacrifice that they are willing to make for our country. I have seen that sacrifice up close. I've met with our troops in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I've visited our wounded in military hospitals here and overseas. Our troops not only defend us, they inspire us. They remind us of our responsibility to build a future worthy of their sacrifice. Because of the courage of our servicemen and women and the determination of the Iraqi people, Iraq's election on Sunday was a significant step toward Iraqis taking their future into their own hands. Now we must consider our future in Iraq. We all know that the United States cannot stay in Iraq indefinitely and continue to be viewed as an occupying force. Neither should we slip out the back door, falsely declaring victory, but leaving chaos. Despite the best efforts of our troops and their Iraqi counterparts, Iraq still faces a violent and persistent insurgency. And the chairman of the National Intelligence Council said in January that Iraq has become a magnet for international terrorists. We have never heard a clear plan from this administration for ending our presence in Iraq, and we did not hear one tonight. Democrats believe a credible plan to bring our troops home and stabilizing Iraq must include three key elements. First, responsibility for Iraqi security must be transferred to the Iraqis as soon as possible. This action is long overdue. The top priority for U.S. military should have been for a long time now training the Iraqi army. We must not be lulled into a false sense of confidence by the administration's claim that a large number of security personnel have been trained. It simply hasn't happened, but it must. Second, Iraq's economic development must be accelerated. Congress has provided billions of dollars for reconstruction, but little of that money has been spent effectively to put Iraqis to work rebuilding their country. Infrastructure improvements in Iraq are more than just projects. They give Iraqis hope for a better future and a stake in achieving it, and they contribute to Iraqi stability. Third, regional diplomacy must be intensified. Diplomacy can lessen the political problems in Iraq, take pressure off of our troops, and deprive the insurgency of the fuel of anti-Americanism on which it thrives. If these three steps are taken, the next elections in Iraq, scheduled for December, can be held in a more secure atmosphere with broader participation and a much smaller American presence. Just as we must transfer greater responsibility to the Iraqi people for their own security, we must embrace a renewed commitment to our security here at home. It's been over 3 years since the attacks of September 11th. Our hopes and prayers will always be with the 9/11 families who strengthen our resolve to win the war on terror. The pain and horror of that day will never be forgotten by any of us. Yet, the gaps in our security exposed by those attacks remain. Despite the administration's rhetoric, airline cargo still goes uninspected, shipping containers go unscreened, and our railroads and power plants are not secure. Police officers and firefighters across America have pleaded for the tools they need to prevent or respond to an attack, but the administration still hasn't delivered for our first responders. The greatest threat to our homeland security are the tons of biological, chemical, and even nuclear materials that are unaccounted for or unguarded. The president says the right words about the threat, but he has failed to take action commensurate with it. We can and we must keep the world's most gruesome weapons out of the world's most dangerous hands. Nothing is more important to our homeland security and indeed to the safety of the world. For 3 years, the president has failed to put together a comprehensive plan to protect America from terrorism, and we did not hear one tonight. As we strive to close the gaps in our security here at home, we must do more to show our great strength as well as our greatness. We must extend the hand of friendship to our neighbors in Latin America. We must work to stop the genocide in Sudan. We must reinvigorate the Middle East peace process. And we must bring health and hope to people suffering from disease, devastation, and the fury of despair. We are called to do this and more by our faith and our common humanity, and also because these actions will enhance our national security. Democrats are committed to a strong national security that keeps America safe, that wins the war on terror, and that never again sends our troops into harm's way without the equipment they need. In our new Partnership for America's Future, House Democrats have made a commitment to guarantee a military second to none, to stop the spread of weapons of mass destruction, to build strong diplomatic alliances, to collect timely and reliable intelligence to keep us safe at home, and to honor our veterans and their families by making sure they have the health care and benefits they have earned. For those returning from military service, our newest veterans, Democrats are calling for a GI Bill of Rights for the 21st century to guarantee access to education, health care, and the opportunity for good jobs. And we must protect and defend the American people, and we must also protect and defend our Constitution and the civil liberties contained therein. That is our oath of office. A strong and secure America was our parents' gift to us. We owe our children and our grandchildren nothing less. Thank you, good night, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
The Democratic response tonight, Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi from California, Senator Harry Reid of Nevada. We'll continue along the way with some of those very same themes when we come back. We will check in with NBC News correspondent Richard Engel tonight in Baghdad, and we will talk about the war and other issues in the president's speech tonight with Senator John McCain and Senator Barbara Boxer when NBC News live coverage continues right after this.
Your family tree just got a whole lot bigger.
Hi, Mom.
Now that Singular has joined forces with AT&T Wireless to bring you the largest calling community in America. Talk to any Singular or AT&T Wireless customer for free.
Hey, what's going on?
All 46 million of them. Add a member of your family tree to ours for just $9.99 a line. The new Singular, raising the bar.
Celebrate the man behind the legend.
The innovator of soul, the genius himself, Ray Charles.
Let his music move you.
What you say?
Let his life inspire you.
I hear like you see, like that hummingbird outside the window. You hear that? A heart just skipped a beat.
Nominated for 6 Academy Awards, Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Actor, Jamie Foxx. Ray, own the DVD now.
It begins as an ordinary day, but for one doctor, something will be missed.
Oh my God.
An all-new ER NBC Thursday.
There are lots of places that you can shop for a new car, but only one place you need to look. IndyAutos.com. At IndyAutos.com, you can shop by price, shop by payment, shop by zip code. You can even shop by dealer. Who says you gotta drive all over town to shop for a new car? Park yourself here. IndyAutos.com. It's like finding a car lot the size of central Indiana.
This Valentine's Day, exceed your expectations with a great gift from Hoffmeister Personal Jewelers. From our stunning collection of diamonds and loose gemstones to our spectacular custom pieces, we'll help you find a keepsake she'll cherish forever. And the best part, she'll love you for it. Make this Valentine's Day special. Come in and find out what so many others are experiencing, that after 30 years at Hoffmeister Personal Jewelers, everything we do is designed to serve you.
We are back on Capitol Hill tonight with reaction to the State of the Union, and I can tell you that Massachusetts Democratic Senator John Kerry, who failed in his effort to become president this last election, has already issued a statement complaining that there was no mention of Osama bin Laden's name in tonight's speech. There was, as Tim Russert points out, a theme throughout of the effort going on in Iraq. We're going to check in live with our correspondent Richard Engel in Baghdad. Richard, as many people have said, the fear in the United States with the domestic audience is, having heard there was a mostly successful election process in Iraq, people will now assume the job is nearing completion, perhaps a troop drawdown among Americans quite soon. What's been the reality the last few nights since we left you there in Baghdad?
The reality, Brian, is that things have been relatively quiet, although nobody here expects that to continue for very long. Most military commanders and Iraqi officials expect that violence will worsen. There has been an intensified period of military operations leading up to the elections themselves, incredible troop presence on the ground, so they still believe they could be benefiting from the operations that were taken ahead ahead of the elections, but think that the insurgents will return, particularly in this vulnerable period of transition while the votes are being counted, while a new transitional government is being established. What was interesting tonight, the president said that we are entering a new phase of the war here in Iraq. The first phase being, of course, the combat phase to topple Saddam Hussein, then the period to leading up to these elections on Sunday, trying to create a government out of chaos, and now to try and phase American troops out of the process and let Iraqi troops to do most of the work. Now, that is very popular here. There is not a soldier or a commander on the ground here in Iraq that wouldn't like to see Iraqi troops doing more of the work, doing more of the combat missions, because since June, that has been the focus. However, insurgents, recognizing that has been the problem, have been targeting Iraqi security forces, and more of them have died here in Iraq than U.S. forces. Brian?
Richard Engel with our situation report tonight from Baghdad. Thank you for that, Richard. And our next guest, we first met Lieutenant Grace Chung when she was Cadet Chung during one of our frequent visits to West Point since 9/11. It was while we were there for an Assignment America series of reports on NBC Nightly News, and Cadet Chung was identified by one of her professors as, quote, one of the rock stars in her senior class at West Point. These days, she is in Enterprise, Alabama, working out of the Army facility at Fort Rucker. Lieutenant Chung, when we met, you were nearing your 500th parachute jump. What was your final number as a cadet?
As a cadet, it was about 526.
526, and now you're at Fort Rucker and you're in the U.S. Army workforce. Let me ask you, so many cadets have said they were actually fortunate to be in your position. You entered the U.S. Military Academy in peacetime. You exited in wartime. They say they're fortunate because they were able to learn real-time lessons from the battlefield, from returning veterans. Is that the case with you?
Oh, absolutely. And with more passing time, I'm actually learning much more as a second lieutenant. I have classmates, previous former West Pointers and other grads and just leaders that have come back from the war, and they've taught us great lessons and continually are guiding us towards that.
And how specifically is the fact that the nation has gone to war during your time in the U.S. Army, how will that make you a better soldier now as your Army career begins?
Well, first off, it gives us a purpose. When I entered West Point as a freshman, it was during peacetime, like you said, and all my classmates and everyone there really didn't have a focus of why we were there, why we signed up in the military. And when 9/11 occurred, I was still in my sophomore year and still had an option to bail out if I wanted to. And like many of my classmates, I stuck it through because now we see a purpose. We see what the military is for, get a better sense of what duty is, what it means to have character on the battlefield and to sacrifice, and you truly get to understand what that means.
Lieutenant, what do you think of what the president said tonight?
I'm very respecting of his views and of his support of our troops, and I think we as in the military forces, the armed services, we are doing our job as best as we can, and we appreciate the support that he and our people back at home are giving us.
Lieutenant, very good to see you again. I still don't know how you fit in time for 526 jumps with the academics over 4 years at West Point, but you did, and good luck to you as you go on about your U.S. Army career. And now, full disclosure, the professor at West Point who identified that particular cadet as a, quote, rock star and is known to think that Lieutenant Chung is emblematic of the new Army. Her former teacher, retired four-star General Barry McCaffrey, NBC News military affairs consultant. First of all, General, a word about your former pupil. How does she represent the new U.S. Army?
Oh, it's a face of the new Army. Look, she's got incredible leadership capabilities. She's brilliant. She's physically tough. These young men and women who are out there defending us around the face of the earth are the best in our society, and it's really reassuring to see combat leaders like Grace now headed out to join the deployed forces.
General, I know you've spoken a lot about the numbers in the U.S. Army. You're feeling that the force has got to increase to meet the test around the globe. Your reaction to the President's speech tonight, what was not in it, perhaps, that you would have liked to have heard?
Well, to be blunt, Brian, I thought it was powerful, emotionally moving, There was one key line to me, which was, we will not set a timetable for withdrawal. We are there to achieve an objective, stable Iraq, peace with its neighbors. I think that is absolutely essential. The worst thing we ever came up with is the whole idea of exit strategies. I think we have to focus on outcomes. So I thought it was a terrific home run of a speech.
General McCaffrey, thank you for being with us. Good to see you as always. And continuing along this theme to a veteran, a prominent Republican member of the U.S. Senate, Senator Barry McCaffrey. Oh boy, I did it, didn't I? Senator McCain, Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona. Senator, we'll begin with your initial reaction to the president's speech tonight.
I don't mind being called McCaffrey.
No, I figured you wouldn't.
I thought it was a very moving speech. I thought the emotion of the grieving mother and the Iraqi woman was really very gripping. But more importantly, I think the president was very confident. He was more at ease than I've ever seen him at a State of the Union speech. I think he has a sort of a sense of himself now that he's been reelected, which is very impressive. And I also agree with General McCaffrey that this is going to be a tough, long, hard struggle we're still in, but we have changed the dynamic from U.S. forces versus insurgents to insurgents versus an Iraqi government, and we can win that one. And but I don't believe that a timetable is what's called for here. It's perseverance.
Let's talk about politics in the Senate chamber, Senator, as I think it's required by law during any discussion with you to use the word maverick. Is the president automatically going to have the votes he needs on your side, on his side of the aisle, as we go forward on issues like the unwieldy topic of Social Security?
Well, I think he gave a very good argument tonight, and he started out by assuring anyone over 55 that they don't have to be concerned about this issue because they'll receive their benefits. I think he made a strong argument for personal savings accounts, and also I think he did point out, look, we could wait till 15 years from now when there's no money at all left in the Social Security Trust Fund, but I don't think we want to wait till then. And I think this is clearly a legacy issue of his, and I think he made a strong argument. He'll now be going to the country.
And, Senator, can you remember a vocal reaction like that one tonight to certain provisions of Social Security with the Democrats shouting no?
We've had a little of that, but it was a little more than usual. There's no doubt that the Democrats have decided to draw a line in the sand on this issue, but I think it's going to be, as in most of these issues that get the attention of the American people, it's going to be up to the American people.
Senator John McCain, with apologies for Baghdad jet lag, converting you to a retired four-star general. Senator, you're nice to join us tonight. Thanks.
Thank you again, Brian.
Now to another member of the U.S. Senate, California Democrat Barbara Boxer. Senator, I'm very curious to hear, as it'll be the first from your side of the aisle, your reaction to the president's speech tonight.
Let me just say, when you cut through a lot of the very powerful words, and he was confident, the president was, and he did deliver his speech very well, I come out with three main themes here. We're going to have an open checkbook for Iraq and an open commitment. He's going after Social Security and scaring the people about it. It's not going bankrupt in 2018. His own administration says 2042, it still will be able to pay 70% of the benefits, so that's a big scare tactic. And he has also announced, which was a little shocking to me, and not only a freeze in domestic spending, but an actual cut below inflation. So it's a very serious challenge that we've been given, and I think it's going to be an interesting fight for the hearts and minds of the American people on these issues.
Well, let me ask you, how do you go about cutting through the confusion? The president himself is fond these days of using the expression bully pulpit, borrowing from Teddy Roosevelt, using the power of his office. How can the minority party go about getting the attention of the American people and giving your side?
It's a good question. Of course, the president has an advantage, but the United States Senate is a powerful institution, and we get elected by our people as well. And the founders really built in these checks and balances. He's going to have to deal with us in the United States Senate. It's true that the Republicans control the Congress, but we are very, I think on our side, willing to work with the president, but we are going to draw the line in the sand, and there's no question about that. You know, the president said in 1978, when he was running for Congress. This is George W. Bush. He said Social Security would be broke by 1988 unless there were private accounts. George Bush has wanted to go after Social Security for a long time, and we have a story to tell. And it's a story about one of the greatest programs that's lifted our seniors out of deep poverty and despair. And I'm going to be looking at what happens when you go to these private accounts. Now, it may be true people 55 and older are going to be able to have their Social Security, but we want our kids to have it too, because it's a very, very successful program.
Now, Senator, the last question. We have a few seconds left.
Yeah.
The American people, as divided as they are, as divided as the U.S. Senate is, love to tell pollsters that they would like to see more cooperation in Washington to get things done. Is there an initiative you can say tonight that you heard in the president's speech that you cannot wait to work with him on and get through Congress?
You'll be happy to know there were several, the Ryan White Care Act, but also the way he talked about supporting our troops and their families. We need to raise the benefits of our veterans. We need to take care of them. And I think we all agree with that, regardless of our position on the war and regardless, you know, over our argument about when we should leave Iraq. By the way, the president laid down now a whole new standard for when we can leave. It has to be democratic, it has to be at peace with its neighbors, it has to be representative of all the people in Iraq, it has to be able to defend itself. That sounds like a real open-ended commitment to me, and I think we really need to look at this.
Senator Barbara Boxer, Democrat of California, last seen playing a key dissenting role in the Condoleezza Rice confirmation hearing. Senator, thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Brian.
When we come back, we will go to the White House and attempt to cut through the fog of the third rail of politics, that is, Social Security, one of the key themes and issues in the President's State of the Union tonight, and the Democratic response when our live NBC News coverage continues right after this.
HP PhotoSmart cameras and printers. It's now brilliantly simple to click, print, invent.
You got a fight I don't know about.
Experience the movie the whole country is talking about. $1 Million Baby, nominated for 7 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director Clint Eastwood, Best Actress Hilary Swank, Best Supporting Actor Morgan Freeman, Best Actor Clint Eastwood. The Best Picture of the Year is now playing at a theater near you. $1 Million Baby, a Clint Eastwood film, rated PG-13.
Tomorrow, Brian Williams talks with Laura Bush about the president's plans for the next 4 years. Which issues are on her agenda and why? NBC Nightly News tomorrow.
The city's most important annual book drive is growing and getting bigger. Hi, I'm Chris Wright. The Half-Price Books Half-Plate Library Book Drive now benefits 2 children's hospitals, Riley Hospital for Children and Methodist Hospital's Children's Pavilion. Drop off new or gently used children's books at any of the Half-Price Books locations. It's so easy to help brighten the child's stay at the hospital, so donate a book now and share the love of reading with the young patients at Riley and Methodist. For more information, visit halfpricebooks.com.
It's time for the big show at Walnut Ridge Family RV. Now through February 12th, experience for yourself the #1 fifth-wheel dealer in the Midwest. No need to battle the elements. Shop inside their new 22,000 square foot showroom or drive throughout the huge expanded 55-acre complex and choose from hundreds of fifth wheels and travel trailers. Walnut Ridge RV will save you thousands. Smart RV shoppers throughout the Midwest know to make the easy drive to Walnut Ridge. Just take I-69 or I-70 to Highway 38 in Newcastle.
We are back from Capitol Hill in Washington on this night of the State of the Union address. We mentioned during our series of Assignment America reports the many Americans we met and spoke with, many of whom we promised to speak to again, and one of them is with us tonight, a gentleman we met over a long meal, produced for television in Atlanta, Georgia. He is Omri Johnson, CEO of WellSolve. Gentleman who was born a Republican but has become a moderate Democrat in his old age and adheres to some but not all of the president's policies. I understand you cast your vote for John Kerry in this last election, and it's around that framework that I ask your opinion and what you were listening for tonight in the president's speech.
I was listening for the domestic agenda. I think the president's done a good job of painting a picture of where we're going to be in Iraq and maybe what we'll do, but I don't feel that we've had a whole lot of concrete evidence about what's going to happen and what's going to be different from the past 4 years where the domestic agenda is concerned.
15 seconds. Social Security. Does anything about this, the president's package, appeal to you?
I would love to have more money in my account, but I don't know if it would be the best thing for me or other Americans like me to control the money. But, you know, he's put a lot of, I guess I would say, controls in it, but I don't think that it's a really good idea for the American people, and I think we should ask the American people what they think.
All right, Omri Johnson, on that note, good to see you again. Thank you for being with us tonight from Atlanta, one of the many people we met during the campaign. And on that, the notion of these personal or private accounts, just part of the fog of the debate over Social Security. For more, we go to NBC News White House correspondent David Gregory standing by on the North Lawn tonight. David, good evening.
Good evening, Brian. And we did hear a lot more from the president about his ideas to reshape Social Security tonight. It's very clear this is going to be the battleground of his second term, and it will be a test of the political capital the president says he earned with re-election.
Say, buddy, can you spare a dime?
Born during the Great Depression, signed into law by FDR, Social Security has for 70 years been a social compact between the government and seniors politicians don't dare tamper with.
Mr. Speaker,
that is before now.
We must pass reforms that solve the financial problems of Social Security once and for all.
Whether there's a Social Security crisis today is debatable, but few question the need for change.
The crisis is for younger workers because the system doesn't have enough money to pay the full benefits that it promises out in the future.
The system is out of balance. A shrinking number of tax-paying workers to pay for a growing number of benefit-receiving retirees, and red flags on the calendar. 2018, when for the first time Social Security pays more to retirees than it receives in taxes. 2042, when Social Security will have spent its reserves, meaning it can only pay 70 cents of every dollar promised to retirees. Over time, the next 75 years, according to estimates, the financial gap runs into the trillions of dollars.
We also have the responsibility to make the system a better deal for younger workers. And the best way to reach that goal is through voluntary personal retirement accounts.
As he discussed tonight, the president's solution is to allow younger workers to invest a small percentage of their payroll tax in the stock market. A personal savings account carries the potential of a better return than the Social Security Trust Fund currently provides. But creating those accounts would deprive Social Security of up to $2 trillion in tax revenue it now gets. And that could mean even more government debt. Reform, the president argues, requires painful choices. On Capitol Hill, those choices are considered politically risky. Republicans are nervous, Democrats united in their opposition to the president.
President Bush should forget about privatizing Social Security. It will not happen.
The opening rounds in a debate over what's next for one of America's most enduring efforts to provide economic security for America's seniors. This debate is on, and the president is trying to sound flexible. As you heard tonight, Brian, he said all ideas are on the table.
David Gregory from the White House tonight, thanks. And this issue puts our next guest at or near the center of attention, Republican Senator Olympia Snowe of the state of Maine. She's a Republican and a moderate, and more important for all this, sits on the Senate Finance Committee. And, Senator, did that impress you at all? Do you think it was a good thing tonight when the president, going through all the past ideas in Social Security, quoting all their authors, said, let's pour it out on the table and talk about it?
Well, I think that is important, what the president did tonight in laying out his vision for Social Security, and he has begun a national conversation, and one in which has to build consensus, not only within the Congress, but of course across America. So I think this is going to be a beginning of a long discussion. He said he's interested in reviewing all the options. He's prepared to listen to new ideas, and he's willing to work with members of Congress and to talk about it. And I think that's an important first step.
Senator, now to these accounts. As you know, the Republicans call them personal, the Democrats call them private, each side looking to avoid any kind of pejorative label. I know you're concerned about them. How many members on your side of the aisle share your concerns, do you think?
Well, it's difficult to say, Brian, at this point, because it's so early in the debate and the discussion. We're just beginning to hold hearings. We held our first hearing today as a member of the Senate Finance Committee. I certainly participated in them to determine the extent and the dimension of the problem. So I think that instead of having both sides so polarized, I hope that we can work together to have an exhaustive examination about exactly how we want to approach this issue before we make any final resolution. It deserves that. We need to support the underlying foundation and principles of the Social Security program that has worked so well for more than 70 years.
A few seconds left, Senator. Is it in crisis or merely broken?
I think it's broken. There is a problem for the future, but one that can be rectified. But I think it's more important that we get it right than to be efficient and to do it wrong. So I think we need to take the time that's going to be essential and necessary to work through this problem.
Senator Olympia Snowe, Republican, State of Maine. Senator, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
We'll be back after a break. Our coverage continues from Capitol Hill right after this.
Blocking new viruses, that's just mean.
I like my email covered and the rest of my computer totally naked.
I like virus protection that updates every 76 years or so, like Halley's Comet.
My computer's a nudist. Who am I to judge?
I only want protection from old computer viruses. You know, the classics.
Now see, my email's protected. My computer is vulnerable, and that's the way I like it.
Hello, new computer virus.
Hello.
Come on in.
Okay.
Nostradamus made no mention of new viruses. So I'm cool.
Millions of Americans are just asking for a computer virus because they're not nearly as protected as they think they are.
I'm a Taurus, so I'm like totally open to new computer viruses.
I'd like a virus that makes my computer freeze up like a banana daiquiri.
That's why America Online now gives our members virus protection that works for your whole computer, not just email. Absolutely free.
That's nice.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Want a better internet? You belong at America Online.
Tonight, Jay's all new with Oscar nominee Cate Blanchett. Plus, it's a jaywalking battle of the sexes. Then on Conan, from The Apprentice, newlywed Donald Trump and ER's Mekhi Phifer tonight.
And then don't touch. They're all rookie cards.
Hey guys, got us a treat. Chicken enchiladas. Smothered in melty, saucy, cheesy.
Smothered.
On the inside.
Oh.
The chicken enchilada grilled stuffed burrito from Taco Bell. Slow simmered savory enchilada sauce, tender all white meat chicken and melted cheese. Wrapped up, then grilled to go.
So what's that for?
For enchilada taste, it's delicious inside and out. Think outside the bun.
The Human Genome Project, a catalog of every gene that makes up our species. Except the one I've identified, the Goodwill Shopper gene. People who have it display a primal need to forage through a wide selection of clothing that changes every day. So naturally, they come to Goodwill. Personally, I don't exhibit this trait, but I am a carrier.
Goodwill. Good clothes, good prices, good idea.
Welcome back. Our coverage continues this State of the Union night in Washington. The President of the United States approaching what has really destroyed the political careers of others, and that is a second term in office. And Tim Russert looking at some of the approval ratings as other presidents have entered their second terms. Eisenhower, 73% approval, Reagan, 64%, Clinton, 60%, Nixon, 51%, and George W. Bush, lowest among modern presidents, appears appeared in the well of the House chamber tonight at only 50% approval rating. He is known to feel very strongly that he will break the second-term curse among modern presidents. What does he have to do?
His view was after the first election in 2000, Brian, he won by a handful of votes. A win is a win. Spend your capital. Define your agenda, or others will do it for you. Full speed ahead on Iraq, Social Security, tax cuts, and it's up to the Democrats not only to oppose him, but to offer an alternative. Washington is fully engaged. And if the president can keep it on those issues, he'll have a good second term. If it goes off into Iraq only and things do not improve there, then it could be a difficult time for him.
I want to bring in some of our other guests on this topic. We're joined from New York by former Maine Senator George Mitchell, former Majority Leader of the U.S. Senate, and with us here in our studios in Washington, Dick Armey of the state of Texas. These days he's running something called Freedom Works, a grassroots organization here in Washington. He, of course, is the former House Majority Leader, and welcome to you. Good to see you.
Nice to be with you.
Senator Mitchell, by satellite, I guess we'll begin with you in New York. When is a win a mandate? Can the president will it as such or label it? You sure hear the word a lot, as you know, in Washington.
Historically, the margin really doesn't make much difference. Presidents who've won by large margins, in some cases, didn't do great in the second term. Others who won by very narrow margins did extremely well. I think it's what they do, what the consequences of their actions are that ultimately dictate their place in history and whether or not they're successful.
Did you hear tonight, Senator, a man who was saying to the American people, in effect, I know where I want to take this nation domestically and our place in the world, follow me?
Well, he clearly has done that in the world. That's obviously controversial, but we'll have to wait and see what happens. There's not much disagreement on being for freedom and for encouraging personal liberty elsewhere. You go back to John Kennedy's speech at his inaugural, Woodrow Wilson. This is consistent with American presidential visions in terms of foreign affairs. It all depends on what actually happens, whether or not the actions tend to be consistent with the high rhetoric that's expressed. In domestic terms, I think he's going to have a very tough time on Social Security, and you kind of saw an indication of that tonight. He's not the first president, he won't be the last, who was quite specific on the benefits. He talked a lot about the voluntary personal accounts. But in terms of the painful part of it, what he said was, well, Senator Moynihan's made a proposal, Bro's made a proposal, right. He's listed several others, and he said, and they're all on the table. So the painful part is up for discussion. The good part, I think he emphasized, it's not the first time it's happened, but I think it's an indication of a tough time to come.
Congressman Armey, if you were advising this president, how do you survive a second term?
Oh, I don't think he will not only survive, he'll prosper. I think, quite frankly, this country is long overdue in its interest in private personal accounts. The fact of the matter is this is an idea that's greater than the man, it's greater than the party, it's greater than the institution. And if the president presents this idea, and if we do the job that we need to do to sell the American people on this opportunity is a real thing in your life, I believe he'll enact it into law, and I believe he'll go down in history as a great president for having done so.
30 seconds. Do troops on the ground complicate the legacy matter in the second term?
I think the president's legacy, he always envisioned to be in very redefining domestic policy. The war against terrorism, I think, was an intrusion against what he had always hoped his presidency to be, and he'll fulfill his hopes in the second term.
I owe you 30 seconds next time around. Congressman Dick Armey, Senator George Mitchell, thank you both for being with us. My thanks, of course, as always, to Tim Russert, our Washington Bureau Chief. Beginning with today's show tomorrow morning and tomorrow evening on NBC Nightly News, we'll continue to gauge the reaction to the president's speech, to the Democrats' ideas in response. Thank you for being with us from Washington. Good night.
Eyewitness News is taking you to a war zone. To the land of Osama bin Laden. Only one Indiana news anchor was invited. Join John Stair on a dangerous journey to Afghanistan and Pakistan.
One of the most stunning areas of the world also happens to be one of the most dangerous.
Our cameras take you inside the war on terror. See how Hoosiers are helping to restore peace. Watch this special report Thursday at 6 on Eyewitness News.
From Indiana's news leader, this is Channel 13 Eyewitness News Night Beat.
Good evening, everyone. We begin tonight with breaking news.
Police in Crothersville have now arrested a man in connection with the disappearance and murder of 10-year-old Caitlin Coleman. 25-year-old Charles James Hickman is now in police custody. Police arrested him earlier today on a preliminary charge of murder, felony murder, and criminal confinement. Hickman is a Crothersville resident. Police tell us that